You cried more than I did. Are you sure you're the one who lost something? That's what Robbie said the night I broke down on the bathroom floor with my hands pressed against the cold tiles and my ribs caving inward like they couldn't hold the ache anymore. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, her mascara still flawless, not a single trace of grief in her expression. My fingers clenched so tight my nails dug half-moons into my palm. I didn't even look up. I couldn't. I thought losing a child would bring us closer. I thought shared grief meant shared healing. But Robbie treated it like a cancelled trip, disappointing, but forgettable. The day after the doctor confirmed the miscarriage, she went to lunch with Anne. I stayed home, folding the baby clothes we never got to use and packing them into a box labeled, "Next time." I left it in the attic, maybe to feel like there was hope, or maybe because I didn't know what else to do with the silence. Robbie didn't ask where the box went. She never asked if I'd named the baby in my head. I had. Her name was Alara, but I kept that to myself. That night, she walked in smelling of wine and cigarette smoke. Anne didn't smoke, Richard did. I was seated at the kitchen table, staring at a cracked ultrasound photo. She glanced at it and rolled her eyes. "You're still hung up on that?" "On that? On that?" My throat burned, but I didn't speak. I learned not to. Words didn't reach her anymore. She opened the fridge, pulled out a beer, popped the cap, and took a long swig. "If you're going to keep acting like some mopey little boy, don't expect me to babysit your emotions. Man up, Arthur." My name, on her lips, felt like mockery. I stood and left the room before I did something I'd regret, like screaming, or cry again, or ask her why she was like this, because deep down, I knew the answer. She'd already detached the night the pregnancy test turned pink. I went to the balcony. Cold air hit my face. It was the only thing lately that reminded me I was alive. Anne called me the next morning. "Arthur, I'm sorry," she said softly. I didn't know she was saying those things. If I had known. "You're not the one I married," I said. "Don't apologize for her." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You can still leave, you know. You don't have to keep drowning." But it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like I'd already died. I was just watching the rest of me rot in slow motion. That evening, I found a receipt on the counter. A hotel room for two. Richard's name was on the booking confirmation. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I simply folded the paper and slid it into my wallet like it was a bill I'd deal with later. At dinner, Robbie told me she was going to a healing retreat, said it would help her process things. I nodded, told her to take her time. She smirked, mistaking my calm for weakness. "Glad you're finally getting it," she said. "Took you long enough." I didn't reply. I was already gone. The next morning, while she packed, I left quietly. Just my phone, a bag, my journal. No confrontation, no goodbye. The only thing I left behind was a note taped to the mirror. "You told me to man up, so I did. I left. Arthur." When people meet me, they think I'm the calm type, reserved, quiet, the kind of man who listens more than he speaks, and they're right, mostly. I've always believed in being steady, in building things slowly. I was never flashy, never loud, just consistent. That's probably why Robbie fell in love with me in the first place. We met at a university lecture hall. She was the girl with the loudest laugh in the room and the most opinions in every debate. She didn't just speak, she performed. Robbie had this way of drawing all attention to herself without even trying. Her eyes glittered with conviction and her voice always ended in confidence. You couldn't ignore her if you tried. And I didn't try. We were different from day one. I was the observer. She was the storm. She liked that I didn't interrupt her. I liked that she could fill a room with life. When we first started dating, she told me she felt safe around me. She said I was the only one who didn't make her feel like she had to compete. She could be loud, messy, chaotic, and I would never try to silence her. I thought that was love. When I proposed, she laughed before she said yes. Not out of mockery, just her way of processing the moment. "I can't believe you're really doing this," she said. "You, planning something so dramatic," but her eyes were shining and she kissed me before I could reply. We got married the following year, small ceremony, friends and family. Anne was her maid of honor, her childhood best friend who always knew how to reel her in when she got too loud. Richard, on the other hand, was an old college friend who couldn't make it to the wedding due to work overseas. At the time, I didn't think much of him. He and Robbie exchanged friendly emails, the kind you send people you've outgrown but still care about in a distant, nostalgic way. That was 4 years ago. The first 2 years of our marriage were noisy, vibrant, and imperfect. We argued about curtains, about budgets, about whether to move closer to her job or mine. But we always found our way back to each other. At night, she would curl up beside me and tell me about her day. I would listen quietly, brushing her hair behind her ear, grounding her when she spun too fast. And then, we decided to try for a baby. It wasn't easy. Robbie had complications, hormonal therapy, medical visits, emotional strain. It tested us. She cried in the bathroom after every negative test. I held her, whispered that we had time, that we could try again, that we'd get there. When we finally saw 2 pink lines on the stick, she screamed. I smiled. She danced around the living room while I stood there holding the test in one hand and my own breath in the other. That night, we fell asleep with her hand on her stomach and mine on top of hers. We started naming things. She picked out nursery themes. I built a small bookshelf for children's books. We were cautious, but hopeful. Robbie's energy returned like fire. She joined forums. She started vlogging her journey. I filmed her laughing in the mirror at her slowly growing bump. Then came the 8th week, and the silence in the doctor's office. No heartbeat. I remember every sound except the one we were desperate to hear. Robbie didn't cry that day, not in the office, not in the car, not even when we got home. She just locked herself in the bathroom and came out 2 hours later with her makeup perfectly redone. I have work meetings this week, she said. Can you cancel the sonogram appointment for Thursday? I nodded. I always nodded. I didn't ask her how she was feeling. I didn't ask because I thought she would tell me when she was ready. She never did. Over the next few days, she buried herself in productivity. She decluttered the nursery, tossed out the baby clothes, cancelled the mate. Renity subscription boxes. No hesitation, no breakdown. It was like she was erasing a typo. But I wasn't ready to erase anything. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering how excited we were to be parents. I thought of the name we never said aloud. I replayed the moment she told me she was pregnant, her voice, her laugh, the joy in her eyes. All gone. Robbie started staying out later. Anne told me she was worried but didn't want to intrude. I didn't blame her. I didn't know how to intrude either, not with someone who kept slamming emotional doors in my face. One night, I found Robbie sitting at the dining table with her laptop. She had a glass of red wine in one hand and a smirk on her face. What? I asked gently. She turned the screen toward me. It was a message from Richard. Still remember how you used to beat me at trivia nights? Miss your laugh. Her cheeks flushed, not with shame, but flattery. He's just being sweet, she said. Don't be weird about it. I wasn't weird about it, I just nodded. That became the pattern. Nod. Stay silent, absorb everything. By the time Anne started stopping by more often, I was already fractured. She saw it in my eyes. She didn't push me to talk. She just brought food, cleaned the unused bottles off the counter, and sat near me in silence. One day, she asked, Arthur, has Robbie grieved at all? I shook my head. I think she's coping differently, I said. Anne looked away. No, Arthur, she's not coping, she's ignoring, and she's ignoring you. That night, I confronted Robbie, gently, carefully. Do you want to talk about it? About what? The baby. She stared at me, then laughed. You really need to stop being so soft. Soft. That's what she called it. Soft. As if grieving the loss of a life we created together made me weak. As if feeling anything other than indifference was a sign of failure. After that, I stopped asking. Robbie began spending more time with Richard. I knew. I saw the notifications, the late-night messages, the changes in her mood. The perfume she wore when she said she was going out with Anne, only to return 5 hours later with the scent of someone else's cologne. Anne noticed too. She came to visit me while Robbie was gone. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know she would drift so far. She didn't drift, I said. She jumped. Anne offered to stay the night once, just to keep me company. I declined. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I still couldn't accept that I was now alone in a marriage. Robbie and I no longer shared a room. She said I snored more lately. It was an excuse, we both knew. By now, I was sleeping in the guest bedroom, waking up with cold sweats and no one to reach for. It wasn't about the miscarriage anymore, it was about everything that came after. Her cruelty, her indifference, her absence. I began making plans in secret. I pulled out my old sketchbooks, I researched design studios abroad. Munich had a place I'd always admired. I sent in an application. They responded in a week, acceptance letter, full scholarship, a fresh start. I didn't tell her, not because I was afraid, but because I knew she wouldn't ask. The first real fracture happened on a Monday, rain on the windows, leftover coffee on the counter, and the bitter echo of a cold weekend stretching between us like an unspoken war. I had stayed home that entire Sunday, Robbie had not. She came back late, her hair still damp from the drizzle, her high heels echoing down the hallway like a metronome counting down the final seconds of a dying rhythm. "Where were you?" I asked quietly. She glanced up from unzipping her purse. "Out." "With who?" She didn't answer right away, just slipped off her earrings and tossed them on the tray beside the keys. "Don't start this again, Arthur," she said. "It's exhausting. I just asked a question." "You're always asking questions." She didn't look guilty, she looked annoyed. The way someone looks at a locked door they didn't expect to find closed. As if my concern was the inconvenience. She walked past me, trailing the scent of cologne that didn't belong to me. It was sharper, muskier. Richard wore Tom Ford. I knew because I'd once helped Robbie pick out that exact fragrance for him, years ago, before I realized I was purchasing intimacy for someone else. I followed her to the bedroom. "Was it Richard?" Her hand paused on her makeup bag. Just for a moment, a twitch, a flicker. Then she scoffed. "I was with Anne." "No, you weren't." She turned sharply. "Excuse me?" "I called Anne. She said she hadn't seen you in 3 days." Robbie's expression didn't flinch. Maybe she forgot. "She doesn't lie, you do." Silence. The kind that buzzes in your ears and tightens the skin behind your neck. She crossed her arms, narrowed her eyes, and tilted her chin upward like a defiant child. "Fine. Yes, I saw Richard. Happy now?" "I'm not asking because I want to be happy, I'm asking because I want to understand." "What's there to understand, Arthur?" she snapped. "He's a friend, he listens, he doesn't act like I'm made of glass or grief. Because you don't let me touch either. You want me to collapse so you can feel strong, is that it? You want me to cry so you can be the savior? Newsflash, I'm not broken, and I don't need your therapy voice." My chest tightened, I took a step back. "This isn't therapy, this is marriage." "Same difference to you, isn't it?" she bit out. "Always quiet, always analyzing. You think being the calm one makes you the right one." I looked down at the floor. "Did anything happen with him?" She didn't respond. So I asked again. "Did anything happen with Richard?" "I already said I saw him." "That's not what I asked." She picked up a bottle of moisturizer and unscrewed the cap slowly, deliberately. Her silence answered everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat. "What do you want me to say, Arthur? That I kissed him? That we had wine and talked about old times? That he touched my hand and I didn't pull away? That I liked it because it felt like someone saw me again?" My throat clenched, but I didn't interrupt. She kept going. "You disappeared months ago. All you do is sulk. You stare at the floor like it holds secrets. You never laugh, you never fight, you just sit there grieving a fantasy. And I'm supposed to sit next to you, day after day, while you fall apart in slow motion?" I couldn't take it anymore. "You could have talked to me." She laughed. "You would have just nodded." That one landed like a slap. "You were supposed to be my partner," I said, more to myself than to her. "You were supposed to be my anchor," she shot back, her voice rising. "Instead, you became a weight." The words cracked something in me. That night, I slept on the couch. I heard her on the phone in the bedroom. Low murmurs, a soft laugh that used to be mine. I didn't need to know who it was, I already knew. The next morning, Anne came over with breakfast. She placed the bag on the counter and eyed me carefully. "Rough night?" I nodded. "Want to talk about it?" "No." She unpacked the food anyway, bacon and eggs, my favorite. I saw Richard yesterday, she said after a long pause, at a cafe in Chelsea. I didn't move. Was she with him? Anne hesitated. Yes. I looked at her. They were holding hands, Arthur. I felt something collapse in my chest, not pain, not even anger, just the final proof of what I already knew. Anne reached across the table and gently touched my wrist. Leave, Arthur, before she burns down what little of you is left. I didn't answer, not because I disagreed, but because I didn't know if I could leave yet. I still loved the woman Robbie used to be, the version of her who used to fall asleep on my chest and laugh at bad movies and cry during commercials. I just couldn't find that version anymore. Later that day, I found a message on her laptop. She had left her screen open while showering. I never checked her things before, but now, the truth was practically begging to be seen. Last night felt real. Thank you for reminding me who I am. I closed the lid. She came out of the shower in a towel, humming something familiar. Want to grab dinner tonight? She asked. I stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or scream. I thought you might want to talk, she added casually, rubbing lotion onto her shoulders. About us. There is no us, I said. Just two strangers pretending they remember how to love each other. She froze mid-motion. I walked to the front door. Where are you going? To remember who I am. Arthur. Don't, I said. Don't make this more dramatic than it already is. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, I said, turning around. You emptied me. And then you blamed me for being hollow. Her eyes shimmered, but I didn't care anymore. You told me to man up, I said. So I did. I'm leaving. And I did. The night I left, I didn't cry, not out of pride, not out of numbness, I just couldn't afford to. Grief was no longer a sudden wave. I'd been living underwater for months. Crying would have felt like wasting breath in a place where breathing was already difficult. I walked aimlessly through the city. Streetlights flickered like tired eyes, and the wind carried that late autumn bite, sharp enough to make you feel alive, but not enough to hurt. I had one bag slung across my shoulder, no destination, no plan, just space. And silence. My phone buzzed once around midnight, a single message from Robbie. Where did you go? I stared at the screen, the letters smudging slightly from the condensation on my fingers. I didn't respond. This wasn't the kind of pain that came from one fight. It was the kind of ache that built slowly, like mold in a quiet corner. You don't notice it at first. Not until the rot starts staining everything. I stayed at a motel that night. The bed was too firm, the room smelled faintly of bleach and burned wiring, and the walls were thin enough to hear someone's broken TV show 2 rooms down. But for the first time in a long time, no one was pretending beside me. There was no shallow breathing beside me, no scent of someone else's guilt curling between the sheets. Only the empty half of the bed. And somehow, that felt like clarity. I lay there, eyes wide open, replaying the past few months like reels on an old projector. I remembered the first time I held the ultrasound photo in my hand, my thumb trembling slightly as I traced the black and white curve of something not quite formed, but already mine. I remembered how Robbie had laughed when I stuck it to the fridge with a cheap heart-shaped magnet. You're such a dad already, she'd teased. That photo had vanished the day she cleaned the kitchen. She never mentioned where it went. I never asked. In the motel bed. My hand reached out instinctively, toward where Robbie's body would have been. I stopped mid-air. Let it fall. I told myself I wasn't reaching for her, just for the memory. By morning, Anne had called. Arthur, she said gently, please tell me you're somewhere safe. I am. Did you sleep? Enough. There was a pause. Do you still love her? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Love wasn't supposed to look like this. It wasn't supposed to hurt like survival. But even after everything, even after Richard, after the lies, after the words she weaponized against my softness, I couldn't say I didn't. And maybe that's what made it worse. Anne didn't press. She just said, if you need to stay with someone, my place is open. I don't want to be anyone's burden. She sighed. You've never been a burden. You've been carrying someone else's weight for too long. I walked the city for hours after that. I avoided familiar parks, skipped past cafes we once shared, crossed streets instinctively to avoid every memory that lingered like smoke. But it was impossible, everything was familiar. Even in places we'd never been together, I still found versions of us sitting in the corner booth, laughing, holding hands, dreaming. It was the dream that hurt the most. I checked into a small rental studio by the riverside, month-to-month lease, fold-out bed, one window, but it was mine. I unpacked in silence, journal, sketchbook, one photo of my parents, and a note I'd kept tucked in my wallet for months, something Robbie had once scribbled on a napkin during our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. "You make me feel like the safest place I've ever been." I folded it back up, tucked it under a coaster, let it stay buried. That night, the silence in the room felt too loud. I scrolled through old messages, conversations that started with "I love you" and ended with emojis. I didn't know who that version of us was anymore. I didn't recognize myself in them. I didn't recognize her. I should have seen it earlier. The way she distanced herself from the grief, the way she turned sorrow into silence, how she avoided eye contact after the miscarriage, the way she flinched when I placed my hand on her back, when I whispered, "We'll be okay." She didn't believe it. Maybe she never did. Or maybe grief changed her. Maybe it changed me. What made it worse was how normal she made the betrayal feel. As if emotional abandonment was just another phase in our story. As if Richard was just a placeholder for a connection she claimed I stopped offering. I hadn't stopped offering. She stopped receiving. She closed the doors and then blamed me for not knocking hard enough. On the 5th night alone, I found myself pacing the apartment like a ghost. I hadn't sketched in months. My mind was cluttered. My hands felt foreign to me. I sat down with my pencil and opened a fresh page. I tried to draw her face. I couldn't. I tried again. Still blank. The more I tried to remember her, the more I realized I'd only memorized the version of her I wanted, not the one who returned from dinners with Richard, not the one who rolled her eyes when I cried, not the one who tossed away our child's memory like it was just another forgotten appointment. I didn't love that version. I couldn't. My phone vibrated on the counter. "Robbie, you didn't even fight for us, you just left, like you never cared." It was a trap, a hook, a weapon wrapped in accusation. I replied, "I fought every day, you just never noticed I was bleeding." She didn't respond. 2 hours later, another message. "He doesn't love me the way you did, I was wrong." I read it, reread it, locked the screen, didn't answer. I sat back, staring at the ceiling, wondering why it still hurt. Why a woman who could dismantle my heart with silence still had power over the parts of me I was trying to rebuild. I wasn't healed. I wasn't free. Not yet. But I was alone. And for the first time in months, that felt like a beginning. 14 days after I left, I received an envelope without a sender name. It had no return address, just my name in her handwriting, sharper than I remembered, the letters more rushed, almost like she hesitated before each stroke. Inside was a folded ultrasound photo. Ours. The one I thought had vanished during Robbie's kitchen purge, the black and white blur of potential, the faint shape of a life that had once existed between us. And scribbled underneath in faint blue ink. Her name was Alara. "I know you named her that." My heart stopped. I stared at that photo for a long time, elbows on the kitchen table, coffee forgotten, air refusing to enter my lungs the way it should. She knew. All this time, she knew. I had never said the name out loud. Never even written it down. It was a name I kept buried deep inside, tucked behind the layers of loss and shame and silence. And yet somehow, she had found it. Underneath the ultrasound photo was a short note. I didn't want to feel it, not then, not when everything collapsed, but I do now. It's too loud, I see her in my sleep, I hear her in the silence. You always said pain doesn't ask for permission, it just arrives. It's here now, Arthur, and I'm not ready, but I finally understand. I set the note down and pressed my palms over my face. The grief surged again, uninvited and absolute. Not just grief for Alara, but for everything we lost around her. The love that used to be fierce and flawed and real. The marriage we broke with 1,000 small ignorances. But more than that, there was fear that this meant she wanted me back. Because I didn't know if I could give her anything anymore. Later that evening, Anne called. Her voice was unusually tight. "Arthur, I just got off the phone with Robbie." I sat up straighter. "Why?" "She asked if she could come see me, said she wanted to talk." My gut twisted. "And?" "She showed up at to my door with a bag of Alara's things, all of them, the booties, the pregnancy journal, even the baby name list you both filled out. I didn't think she kept any of that." "She didn't," Anne said softly. "She went back to the clinic, requested copies, tracked down the delivery from the baby store. She cried, Arthur, like she hadn't allowed herself to until now." I didn't say anything. My throat wouldn't let me. Anne continued, slower now. Then she said something that scared me. "What?" She said, "He won't come back to me, Anne, I know that. But maybe if I give him everything he thought I threw away, maybe he'll believe I felt it too." The line went silent for a second. My hands gripped the edge of the table. "She's planning something, Arthur," Anne whispered. "Not the manipulative kind, the final kind." I stood. "Where is she now?" She said she'd be visiting the river walk, said it helps her think, but Arthur, I didn't hear the rest. I was already grabbing my coat. By the time I reached the river, it was just past 9. The breeze rolled off the water, sharp and damp. Street lamps threw long shadows over the pavement. A few joggers passed by, music in their ears, unaware that a storm was unraveling just a few feet away. Then I saw her. Robbie sat on the edge of a bench, coat wrapped tightly around her, hair tied back messily. Her hands were clasped so tight they'd gone pale. I approached quietly, unsure what to say, unsure what I wanted to say. When she looked up, her eyes were raw, not red, not puffy, just raw, the kind of eyes that had finally let pain in and didn't know how to close again. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I wasn't going to." She nodded like she expected it. "I sent the photo. Not because I want anything, I just didn't want to die with that name still locked inside me." My breath hitched. "Don't say that." "I didn't mean literally." A bitter smile. "Maybe. I don't know." We both stared at the water. The ripples looked like they were breathing. She continued. "When I first read that name in your journal, yes, I read it, I thought it was pathetic. Naming something that never took a breath." "You read my journal?" I was angry. I wanted to know how much you blamed me. "I never blamed you." Her eyes shined again. "But you should have." I turned toward her. "Why?" "Because I erased her. I buried her in my denial. I killed her twice." "No," I said sharply. "You protected yourself the only way you knew how. I resented you, yes, but you didn't kill anything." Silence. Then she whispered, "I think I've been carrying her longer than I knew." I sat down beside her, close, but not touching. "You were always better at feeling things slowly," she said. "You let the pain unfold. I tried to outrun it. Turns out grief doesn't chase, it waits." The streetlight above us flickered. "I'm not here to fix anything, Robbie," I said. "I'm not here to hold hands and pretend we can glue everything back together." "I know." "Then why did you call me?" "Because I didn't want Richard," she said quietly. "Not really. He was a mirror. He reflected what I wanted to feel, wanted to believe. That I was still attractive, still wanted, still whole. But you weren't." I was shattered. We sat in silence again. The night stretched long. I thought of Alara, thought of Robbie's hands once tracing her own belly, thought of all the nights we spent avoiding each other, too afraid to say what hurt. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. "I'm leaving." I turned sharply. "What?" "I'm moving out of the apartment. I'm applying for a project position abroad, a year minimum, maybe longer." I blinked. "Why?" "Because I can't heal where I broke everything. And you shouldn't have to wonder if I'm going to show up on your doorstep again." She looked at me, eyes wide, voice steady. "I don't want to ask for another chance. I just want to say, I'm sorry, I really am." I searched her face. I didn't see the woman who mocked me for crying. I didn't see the woman who called me weak. I saw someone grieving. Finally, I nodded once. "Thank you for saying that." Her shoulders sagged, like she'd been holding that weight for months. As I stood to leave, she reached into her coat pocket and handed me one last folded paper. "What is it?" "A drawing," she said. I tried to sketch her, based on how I imagined she'd look. I took it with trembling hands, and walked away before I changed my mind. 3 weeks passed. Robbie didn't call again, not once, no texts, no emails, not even the silent kind where she sends a photo and pretends it was meant for someone else. The woman who once made noise simply by walking into a room had gone completely quiet. But grief doesn't wait for silence to speak. I kept her sketch. I hadn't opened it yet. Part of me didn't want to see her version of Alara, what she imagined we lost. I feared it would look too much like mine, or worse, that it wouldn't look like anything at all. Anne visited one Sunday with takeout and sat across from me on the couch. "Have you heard from her?" she asked, peeling the lid off her soup. I shook my head. "She told me she's taking the job in Prague." I blinked. "Prague? An architecture residency, big deal. She flies out in 2 weeks." It hit me harder than I expected, not sadness, not regret. Finality. She was really going. Anne sipped her soup quietly, then said, "She wanted to see you, said she didn't have the right, that if she reached out again, it'd just be guilt trying to dress up as redemption." I didn't respond. She added, "But she is different, Arthur. I've seen her unravel, not perform, not justify, just unravel." That night, I stood at the edge of my studio window, staring at the water. I finally unfolded the sketch. Alara. Tiny, curled in sleep, wisps of hair above her brow, a peaceful expression that didn't belong to this world, but maybe one softer than ours. It wasn't professional. The lines were jagged, as if drawn through tears. It was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of Robbie, but because I suddenly realized I wasn't angry anymore. The next day, my doorbell rang. I expected Anne. It wasn't. Robbie stood there in a grey coat, hair pulled into a low braid, no makeup on. For the first time since the miscarriage, she looked unfinished, human. "I'm not here to fix anything," she said. "You said that already," I replied. She half smiled. "I lied, this time I mean it." I stepped aside. She entered slowly, like someone walking into a burned-down house. She glanced at the sketch on my coffee table and blinked twice before facing me. "I know you're leaving," I said. "Yes." "Why are you here?" She pulled out a folded letter. "Because I need you to hear something. One last thing." I stayed silent. She opened the letter, voice shaking as she read. "To the man I called weak when he was the only one holding the both of us up." Her fingers trembled. "I mocked your tears because I couldn't afford to let mine fall. I buried our daughter because I didn't know how to love something that wasn't breathing. And when you reached for me, I pulled away, not because I didn't want to be held, but because I didn't think I deserved it." A pause. She inhaled. "I confused silence for strength, I confused affection for control, and I let someone else's attention feel like safety because it didn't require honesty. Richard was a mirror. I stood in front of him because he didn't ask me to look inward." My chest tightened. "You did, and I ran." Robbie folded the letter. "That's all." "No," I said quietly. "That's not all." She looked up. "You can't read that and just walk away," I said. "Not until you answer me one thing." "Okay." "When did you stop seeing me?" Her lips parted, but she hesitated. I repeated, slower, firmer. "When did you stop seeing me? Not as someone grieving, not as someone broken, but as me?" She took a shaky breath. "The day you told me you had named her Alara," she whispered. "I never told you. I saw it written in your sketchbook. I pretended I didn't. I mocked you after." "Why?" "Because you had something I didn't," she said. "A connection, a vision. You had grief, real grief. I just had panic. And I couldn't stand the idea that you were more of a parent to her than I was." That landed deep, unexpected. "I thought naming her made me weak," she continued, "but watching you mourn her, that made me hate myself." I sat down, she stayed standing. "You want forgiveness?" I asked. "No." "You want closure?" "Not even that." Then why? I want to remember that I loved you, she said. Before all this. Before the hurt. I want to leave knowing I still know what love looked like. Even if I don't get to keep it. The room went still. I stared at the floor, then at her, then at the framed ultrasound still tucked behind the books. She followed my eyes. I should have said her name out loud, she whispered. You just did. A single tear fell down her cheek. Just one, then she smiled, broken and whole all at once. I don't expect you to wait for me, she said. But if one day, if we ever meet again and there's nothing left but recognition, I hope you smile at me. I'll nod, I replied softly. It's what I do. She laughed under her breath. I always loved that about you. I always hated that you never did. She walked toward the door, paused, and turned one last time. Goodbye, Arthur. I stood. Goodbye, Robbie. She opened the door, and paused again. Oh. And tell Anne thank you, she said. She saved me, in her own way. I think she saved us both. Then she left. No dramatic music, no slow motion, just the quiet sound of a door closing. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. She was finally walking in the right direction. So was I. 6 months later, I stood beneath the glass dome of the Munich Design Institute. My work was mounted on a white wall, lit by soft gallery lights. A series of 12 renderings, black and charcoal sketches of empty spaces, a nursery, a kitchen, a bed with a missing side, every frame titled by memory. The final piece was different, titled Elara, a sketch of a child, curled in fetal peace, asleep between the blurred shadows of two uncertain hands. People walked past, pausing, a few murmured. Some stared longer than others. One woman stood with her hand on her chest for nearly 3 full minutes. None of them knew me. Not really. But they saw my grief. My redemption, my revenge. Robbie once told me men don't know how to express loss, that we carry it like a stain instead of a story. So I turned mine into art. At the center of the gallery, I watched as my name lit up on the rotating projector. Arthur Lennox, featured international artist, studio residency extended. Anne called during the gala. I'm proud of you, she said. Robbie saw the exhibit preview online. She didn't say much, just that it looked honest. Honest is what I owed her, I said. Nothing more. She's in Prague, Anne added. Teaching kids, quiet life, no news about Richard. I smiled faintly. There was never news, just damage control. Anne was silent a moment, then she asked, do you miss her? I miss who she used to be, but I don't miss the person she became to survive hurting me. She's not that person anymore. No, she's not. But it didn't change what happened. After the exhibit, a small publisher approached me, a woman named Liesel who looked like she had survived 1,000 goodbyes. She held up her phone. I read the write-up on your story, she said. Miscarriage, divorce, leaving without slamming the door. I didn't want to make noise, I replied. But you did, she smiled. In silence. She offered me a book deal, Grief in Architectural Design, The Spaces Loss Leaves Behind, How Blueprints Can Hold Trauma Without Crumbling. I accepted. 2 months into the project, I wrote a chapter titled, The Room We Unbuilt. It was about the nursery. The drawer I lined with folded onesies. The mobile I installed without telling her. The ultrasound magnet I reprinted from my scanned email even after the original disappeared. The space I created for someone who never arrived, and how it became the room I locked for years inside myself. I sent the draft to Anne for review. She called me crying. She would have loved it, she said. Your daughter. Elara. Even saying her name felt like soft thunder now. She had never taken a breath, but she had changed mine. That was my revenge. Not screaming, not exposing, not dragging Robbie or Richard through public shame. My revenge was healing. My revenge was becoming a man who didn't need to explain his worth to the woman who once called him weak. 3 more months passed. My book launched at the Frankfurt Design Festival. I stood on stage, holding the first copy, heartbeat steady. In the crowd were professors, students, survivors, women holding hands with men whose knuckles had learned to shake only in private. I read the final paragraph aloud. They told me to be stronger, that real men don't break. But I did. And in breaking, I found a door, a way out. I didn't burn the house down, I didn't set fire to her lies. I left. And sometimes, leaving is the strongest thing a man can do. The applause didn't matter, but the silence afterward, that did. I stepped off stage. Anne met me in the wings with a tight hug. "Someone's waiting," she whispered. I turned. Robbie stood near the exit. She wore a black coat and no makeup. In her hands was a wrapped package. We hadn't seen each other since the night at my apartment. I approached slowly. "You came all the way to Frankfurt?" "I was already in Germany," she replied. "Conference for the academy." She handed me the box. Inside was a leather-bound journal, not a gift, mine, the one she read without permission. "I kept it," she admitted. "I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I added something." I flipped to the last page. There, in faded ink, she had written, "Elara, I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to name you while you were here, but your father was, and someday, if I see him again, I'll tell him that he didn't lose a daughter, he gave her a name that lived longer than either of us." I looked up. Robbie's eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. "I don't want anything," she said. "Just to return what I took." I nodded once. "Thank you," I said. "Congratulations, Arthur." "You too. I heard your students love you." She smiled. "Kids are easier to teach when you stop trying to be the hero." We didn't hug. We didn't pretend. We just stood there. Two people who once shared everything, now only holding the space between them. As she turned to leave, she paused. "You were right that night," she said. "You did man up." "No," I replied. "I just stopped letting someone else define what a man is." She nodded slowly. "That's even better." She walked away. This time, I didn't watch her go. I turned back toward the gallery, toward the books, the exhibit, the future. No haunting, no anger, no regret, just space. Space where grief once lived, space I had designed to finally breathe in.